Welcome to another Mike Reads Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing Thomas Sowell's Intellectuals and Race. I will put a link in this video's description to where I got this version of this book on Amazon. This was something that Thomas Sowell wrote according to his introduction as basically an addendum to Intellectuals and Society. I actually have that. I'll hopefully be reading that soon. So let's get right into it. So I think I'll start off with my review in general, and then I'll get into what it is, and then I'll get into more more specifics. But generally speaking, I think this is one of Thomas Sowell's worst works. I've read an awful lot of his works now. Some of them I've actually read on this channel, and I'm sure you can cycle through my reviews and see plenty of reviews of Thomas Sowell's works. I think this is the worst one. That said, let's get into what it is, and then I'll get into more specifics. So, as an addendum to Intellectuals and Society, I think there was some consideration about how he treats intellectuals and some topics within that heading that he really didn't focus too much of his energies on. This is actually a relatively recent print. Let me see if I can find the original date of copyright. Yeah, so copyright 2013. Portions of this text were previously published in the paperback edition of the author's work in Intellectuals and Society, published in 2012 by Basic Books. So here's why I think that it's one of his worst works. So first things first, let's talk about the good. And I always like to start off with, of course, the book itself. First things first, that's how long this book is. So I love that. I love the fact that Thomas can stick to a specific topic. This reads like a collection of essays. Let me talk. I gotta stay on the book itself. I love the paper. It's nice, thick, heavy paper. That's pretty ergonomic. The book itself is sturdy, so I like that. And then the font. I wish the font was bigger because the book is so thin. It could have afforded to have had the spacing on the font is actually really good. It looks like it's a full double space. And I like the way that he breaks down his chapters into fairly digestible reads. The whole book is 139 pages of actual content divided into 8 chapters. So it's not like you get where with Adam Smith with his The Wealth of Nations, there were chapters in that book that were like 300 pages long, and that just doesn't make for a very digestible read. It doesn't make for very good stopping points. So I really like that about the book itself. But now we got to get into the content, and that is because as much as I love... So first things first, Chapter 5 is the chapter to get out of this, because this reads almost like a discontiguous series of essays that are kind of separate from each other. It seems like there were like 2 or 3 points he wanted to make in Intellectuals and Society and just didn't have room to throw it in as an update to that book, an updated addition to Intellectuals and Society. And I think that's what he should have done. I think he should have just added a few chapters to Intellectuals and Societies, because there's really only 2 or 3 points that he's adding to that content. And it seems like in order to create its own separate book, he has to basically bifurcate all of these ideas into effectively separate essays that just don't work well together and just don't transition well together. The other thing is that with his later works, it seems like he's suffering from what most writers suffer from in this realm. And that is that because they have made these arguments so many times and to such an extraordinary extent, their arguments tend to dissolve into their reductionist version. And I think that's what he's done with chapters 1 through 4 and chapters 7 and 8, is he's already done these arguments. So instead of presenting them the way he has in the past, like for example with oh God, what was the name of that book? Oh, Discrimination and Disparities. So in Discrimination and Disparities, he has several key points, and then he beats you over the head with them in a way that doesn't feel like he's beating you over the head with them. He's just hitting you hard with the data on the matter. And to that effect, normally, I mean, first things first, he's got, I think it's 20 pages. Let's see how long this is. So his citations are, oh God, okay, 37 pages long. So they're a quarter of the length of the book, as they normally are. But almost all of those citations are chapters 5 and 6. And chapter 5 is a wonderful chapter. It's actually, it's I think the reason he wrote this, and it's Race and Intelligence. And I know it's a really tough topic to go over, and the way he does it is just absolutely brilliant. He does it the way he normally does it, which is, here's the data. You can interpret it these various different ways. The way that it's been commonly interpreted is an improper way to interpret it because of X, Y, Z, citation, 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 citation. And I love the way he does that with discrimination and disparities when he talks about similar subjects. But I think that he winds up getting to a reductionist perspective with chapters 1 and 2 and 3, because the annotations that you see in chapters 1 and 2 are only like a page or two long of that like 37 pages, right? Like if I open up to the notes page here, let's see, chapter 1 is, no, that's actually a lot longer than I thought, but yeah, okay, chapters 1 and 2 occupy 7 pages of that 37 pages. But basically all of these citations come from chapter 5, which is why chapter 5 is the whole reason to get this book. So if you ever want to have that conversation about race and intelligence in a way that is actually well thought out and not either outright racism or a reductionist perspective that would lead to somebody calling you racist for something that is not. Yeah, he does it incredibly well, and he does it delicately, and he does it with non-stop data. And that's the way I like Sowell to write. Unfortunately, we don't see that with those first few chapters, and I think that's because he's basically already made these arguments so many times, he doesn't think he needs to do them the way he's done them in the past. So, if you want, I can go right ahead into the recommendation here, because, I try to make my reviews of not very long books, not very long reviews. So what I would say is I actually don't recommend this book. If you're really, really, really into Sowell, then I would say if you're going to get this book, chapter 5 and 6 are really cool. And that might be the reason you buy this, is to see the data on race and intelligence in a way that is actually respectful to the conversation. Just for that chapter's fine. Go ahead and buy the book. It really wasn't that expensive from memory. I don't know. I have to look that up. But I would say the better book is Discrimination and Disparities, which is actually, I believe, I've already done a review on that. I'll link to that in this video's description as well. I think that's the better book. And I would say that if I was giving advice to Thomas Sowell, I would say instead of having a separate addendum to intellectuals in society, I think that there's a lot of redundancy in this book with that book. So instead, just take the stuff from this book that isn't redundant and put it into that book as an updated version, as an updated volume, right? So he's done that with Basic Economics over the course of the years. Adam Smith did that over the course of the years with The Wealth of Nations. Even Thomas Paine updated Common Sense over the course of the years, which really, I mean, I don't know why he would need to, but he did. And I think that's probably the better way to go about this. So I've given you the recommendation. Honestly, I'm not going to recommend buying it. I should add, yes, that Thomas Sowell, like he always does, writes to the reader. This is a very easy read. He speaks in very common parlance. He doesn't speak above you. He doesn't speak beneath you. I think he speaks to the common reader. I think his tone at times can be a little bit more volatile in this book than it normally would be. I think that his critique of his opposition, I think his critiques are more of the opposition than the arguments of the opposition in this book than in other books that he's written. So I always like to close with a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. Honestly, this is going to be mean. This is going to sound harsh, but I'm going to give this book a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. I don't think it was even as good as some of the chintzy Star Wars reading that I've done, because so much of this is really like just not well organized. And not well presented. So, again, I can't recommend actually getting this book unless you're an absolutist for getting every one of a completionist for Sowell's works. And if that's going to be the case, just skip right to chapters 5 and 6. Those are the really cool chapters. That's the new material that he's going to be presenting. Everything else, if you want to have those conversations, get Discrimination and Disparities, because it's a much better book. So I'll post a link to where I got this version in this video's description. If you're absolutely dead set on buying it, so be it. And until the next time, this has been Mike, signing off.